I folded the last linen napkin and placed it beside the single plate on the table. The roast chicken, just for me, had finished cooking 15 minutes ago and now rested in the oven, staying warm for no one in particular. The living room was dimly lit, the way I liked it, just the Christmas tree glowing quietly in the corner, dressed in gold and ivory ornaments I'd collected over decades. The angel at the top was slightly crooked, but I left it that way. It gave the room character. Like me. I checked my phone again. Nothing from Emily. 3 days ago, she'd called, her voice soft and filled with carefully constructed regret. Mom, I'm so sorry. We can't come this year. George's mom isn't doing well. The doctor said she shouldn't be left alone. It's not the Christmas we wanted either. I swallowed the ache that rose in my throat. I understood. I always did. This was the third Christmas in a row I'd spend by myself, and by now I'd trained myself not to expect the sound of wrapping paper tearing or grandchildren's footsteps thundering through the hallway. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. When Emily added, "Let's do something big for New Year's instead, okay?" So I made dinner anyway, just in case, just to feel normal. It was nearly 7 p.m. when my phone buzzed. A message from my old colleague, Bonnie. Guess who I bumped into at the Four Seasons in Maui Small World? Attached was a 12-second video clip of a fire dancer spinning across a beach stage. Tourists clapped in the background. I smiled. At first, ready to type a polite reply until I froze. There, seated at the edge of the crowd, was Emily, in a red sundress I'd gifted her last spring. George beside her, clapping and laughing. Their children, wearing plastic leis. George's mother, grinning wide, drinking from a pineapple. Very ill indeed. I set my phone down slowly, my hands trembling, but not with sadness. Not this time. Stood up, blew out the cinnamon candle on the table, and muttered, almost under my breath, "You lied to the wrong mother." I sat by the window the next morning, a cooling mug of tea in my hands, watching snow settle on the bare rose bushes outside. The silence in the house felt heavier now, not the gentle kind that comforted me in retirement, but the kind that pointed fingers. It whispered reminders I'd tried for years to ignore. I thought back to the first big ask, 7 years ago. Emily had just married George, a man I'd never warmed to. Polite, yes. Presentable. But there was always something calculated. Behind his eyes, she'd called on a Sunday afternoon, chipper and strategic. "Mom, we found the perfect starter home, but we're just a little short on the down payment. Just until tax season. You'd be helping us build our future." I was newly widowed at the time and desperate to stay close to my daughter, so I agreed. $25,000 wired without hesitation. No contract, no timeline, no questions, just trust. Then came the babysitting. Weekends at first, then weekdays. "Just a few hours," Emily would say. "You're so good with them, Mom. They light up when they see you." What started as joyful bonding with my grandchildren slowly twisted into unpaid daycare. No thanks, no return favors, just dropped off kids and tired eyes from sleepless nights. When I mentioned planning a visit to their home, Emily always had a reason to stall. "We're renovating," or "George's parents are already coming that weekend," or the evergreen favorite, "Let's wait until things settle down." But things never settled, at least not for me. I remembered last summer, when Emily called breathless and dramatic. "Mom, George lost his job. We're drowning. Just a small loan, maybe 10 grand. We'll pay you back once he's back on his feet." I dipped into my savings again. The repayment never came. Neither did updates. Only new requests. Emily had a way of weaving guilt into her voice, like stitching a quilt made entirely of obligations. I'd convinced myself time and time again that I was being generous, that I was supporting my daughter through hard times. But looking back, now, with that image of Emily on a Hawaiian beach burned into my mind, it all shifted. This wasn't support. It was exploitation, couched in smiles and smothered in sweet nothings. I could no longer remember the last time Emily had asked how I was doing. Had I eaten? Was I lonely? Did I need anything? No. She only called when there was a problem to solve, or a bill to cover. I stood, walked to my desk drawer, and pulled out a spiral notebook I kept for journaling. I flipped to a fresh page, uncapped my pen, and wrote, Emily, running total. Then I listed everything. Down payment, $25,000, remodeling loan, $60,000 emergency help, $10,000 unpaid caregiving, incalculable. I underlined the last one twice. I didn't believe in keeping score, but this wasn't keeping score anymore. This was waking up. I closed the notebook and looked up at the snow once more. It was still falling, steady and soft. But inside me, something had started to freeze. And it was never going to melt again. The first thing I packed was my notebook. I didn't call Emily. I didn't send a message asking for an explanation. I didn't need to hear another lie wrapped in fake affection. Instead, I opened my laptop and booked a room at the very same resort, Four Seasons Maui at Wailea. A 5-night stay, ocean view, no hesitation. My flight left at dawn. I didn't tell a soul. When I landed, the Hawaiian sun felt too warm, too honest. I walked through the resort lobby with quiet resolve. A floral lei placed around my neck by a cheerful greeter. The front desk staff welcomed me with chilled juice and a smile. I smiled back, politely, but my eyes scanned the marble floors like a hawk. I found them on my second day. It was late afternoon, near the adults-only infinity pool. Emily was reclined on a lounge chair in a wide-brimmed sun hat and a strapless, deep, blue bathing suit. George stood nearby in board shorts, talking to the bartender like he owned the place. Their 2 children were splashing happily in the shallow end, under the supervision of George's father. And there she was, George's mother, the one who had supposedly been too ill to sit upright, let alone fly. She was laughing with a drink, in one hand and a tablet in the other, showing family photos to a group of strangers. Her skin tanned, her nails manicured. She looked like she'd never heard the word illness in her life. I watched from behind a row of palms, wearing sunglasses and a modest floral dress. I didn't flinch. I didn't gasp. I observed. Later that evening, I dined alone in the resort's outdoor restaurant. From my table in the corner, I saw them again, dressed up for a luau. Emily wore the red sundress I'd once mailed her for her birthday, the one she never thanked me for. I twirled my wineglass between my fingers, silent. A younger version of myself might have marched over, demanded answers, raised my voice. But I'd learned something over the years. Explosions satisfy in the moment, but silence echoes longer. On the third day, I sat at the breakfast terrace with a newspaper, pretending to read while watching my family file into the buffet. Emily was first, holding a plate and laughing at something George said. I stood, walked across the terrace, and passed right by their table. Their laughter continued, until Emily looked up and saw me, the plate in her hand tilted. The toast slipped off. I stopped in front of her, calm and composed. My voice was soft but cut like wire. Didn't recognize me in the sunlight, did you? Emily's mouth opened, but nothing came out. George stood awkwardly, blinking. George's mother looked like she'd just seen a ghost. I took a step closer and smiled. You always told me I should take a vacation. So, here I am. Then I turned and walked away, leaving my daughter standing in the middle of paradise, burning with something that no ocean could cool. Back in my room, I slid my balcony doors open and let the salt breeze fill the space. I poured myself a glass of water, sat down at the writing desk, and pulled out my notebook. I drew a line across the page beneath the last entry. Then I wrote 3 words in careful cursive. The game ends, and below that, underlined twice, no more calls, no more money, no more pretending. The morning sun was already bright when I walked into the resort's breakfast buffet, dressed in crisp white linen pants and a pale blue blouse. My silver hair was neatly brushed back, my lips painted with a muted mauve, and I wore the softest trace of perfume, a scent Emily used to love when she was a little girl. I didn't rush. I walked like someone with all the time in the world. The buffet was busy, filled with couples in beachwear and families herding sleepy children toward pancake stations. In the middle of the dining area sat Emily and her family, exactly where I expected them, Same table as yesterday. Same routine. George was buttering toast. Emily was scrolling through her phone. George's mother was laughing at something on her screen. I picked up a plate, slowly spooned scrambled eggs onto it, added fruit I had no intention of eating, and approached the table without a word. I stood just beside them, and it took a full second for Emily to realize someone was near. When she looked up and met my eyes, the color drained from her face like paint under rain. "Mom?" she choked out, blinking as if she were dreaming. George looked up, startled, and froze with a piece of bacon half raised to his mouth. The children went silent. Even the sound of plates clinking nearby seemed to fade into background static. I held my daughter's gaze with the calm of someone who had finally seen the full picture and could no longer unsee it. I placed the untouched plate gently on their table. Then, in a voice that carried no anger, just truth, I said, "No one gets to lie to their mother twice." Silence. Emily opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Mom, But I was already turning. I walked away slowly, steadily, like someone exiting a room after blowing out the last candle. I didn't look back, didn't need to. The tension I left behind would do all the speaking I didn't. I returned to my room, packed neatly, and checked out within the hour. At the front desk, the concierge asked, "Did you enjoy your stay, Ms. Langley?" I smiled, folding my receipt and tucking it into my purse. "Oh, it was unforgettable." I took one last look at the ocean, blue and endless, and walked out to my taxi. On the plane, I sat by the window, my hands folded in my lap, my reflection faintly visible in the glass. I didn't feel anger. That had passed. What I felt now was something quieter, not quite peace, but something close, a sharp clarity. By the time the wheels touched the ground back home, I'd already decided. This wasn't the end of a vacation, this was the beginning of a reckoning. I arrived home to silence. Not the kind that echoed with emptiness, but the kind that waits, pregnant with intention. I set my suitcase by the door, stepped out of my shoes, and walked directly to the kitchen. The Christmas table was still there, untouched since the night I'd left. The single plate, the folded napkin, the half-melted candle. I didn't cry. I picked up my phone instead. First, I called my bank. It took 3 short conversations and 1 confirmed verification before I canceled. The automatic transfers to Emily's account. The monthly deposits I'd set up 2 years ago to help them breathe. Breathing apparently meant beachfront cocktails. Then I called my attorney. A woman named Pauline, who had drafted my will when I retired. "I want to revise everything," I said. "Effective immediately. I want Emily Langley removed entirely." Pauline paused, as if she were about to ask something personal, but then said, "Of course. We can schedule a new signing this week." That afternoon, I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I clicked through the photos I'd taken with my phone before leaving for Hawaii. The single dinner plate on my Christmas table, the small pine wreath on my front door, my untouched gift for the grandchildren, still wrapped in silver. Then I opened the vacation clip Bonnie had sent, the one with Emily laughing under tiki torches, and took a screenshot. I adjusted the image, gently blurring the faces so the focus remained on the atmosphere. Lies, cocktails, bright dresses, and wide smiles under a banner that read, "Mele Kalikimaka." I created a collage, 2 photos side by side. On the left, my solo Christmas table. On the right, Emily's Hawaiian celebration. I uploaded them to Facebook with a caption that read, "Some lies can only live in the dark. I prefer the light." Didn't tag anyone. Didn't mention names. I didn't need to. By the following morning, the post had over 200 comments and nearly 100 shares. Old co-workers commented with heart emojis and lines like, "Some people don't deserve the love they're given." A few parents from Emily's old school messaged privately to ask if I was okay. Then came the whispers. A friend of a friend messaged, "Did you know Emily was up for a leadership role on the PTA board? That might not happen now." Another wrote, "She always acted like the perfect daughter. I guess perfection's just a filter." I sat back, reading each comment slowly. I didn't respond. I just let the truth breathe. By the end of the week, I received a text from Emily. Emily, Mom, what are you doing? This isn't fair. You're ruining everything. Call me now. I read it once, then twice. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my notebook and flipped past the debts and decisions. I wrote, "There are truths I will carry with me. There are others I will leave right here." I closed the notebook and lit a candle on the windowsill. Outside, snow began to fall again, coating the street in white. I sat quietly, alone, but not lonely. Not anymore. I'd learned that some silences were not empty, but earned. Emily didn't call until the money stopped. I wasn't surprised. I expected silence for a few days, followed by a panicked text, then a string of voicemails laced with a syrupy tone that only ever surfaced when she was about to ask for something. The first voicemail came 2 days after I canceled the monthly transfers. "Hi, Mom. I noticed something weird with our bank account. I think maybe a transfer didn't go through. Can you check? Love you." I listened to the message with a detached calm, as if I were hearing someone else's daughter. I saved it, then let it sit, untouched. The next day, there were 3 more messages. The concern in her voice had turned brittle. "Mom, it's not funny to just cut us off. If something's wrong, you need to tell me." Then, "I know you're upset, but this isn't the way to handle it." Then finally, "You're hurting your own grandchildren. I hope you're proud of yourself." I played each message once, then pressed delete. No replies, no reactions, just quiet resolve. A week passed before the unexpected happened. I was trimming my indoor plants, orchids I'd nurtured since before Emily was born, when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a flower delivery, a simple bouquet of white lilies and hydrangeas. No card. I didn't need one. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a new text. But it wasn't from Emily. George's mother, Janice. "Hello, Margaret. I hope this isn't too forward, but I wanted to say, we didn't know. About the lies, about the money, about Christmas. You deserve better than how you were treated. And if you're willing, I'd like to invite you to our anniversary dinner next month. We'd love for you to be there. Just you." I reread the message several times. Of all the people I'd expected silence or complicity from, Janice was near the top. Yet here she was, extending a hand. A small, private gesture of dignity. I replied with a simple line. "Thank you for your kindness. I'd be honored." And that was that. Word of the Facebook post, and what followed, had rippled further than I intended. People talked, whispers found their way into PTA meetings, neighborhood potlucks, and even George's firm. Reputation like trust was harder to rebuild than to shatter. Emily called again. I didn't answer. 2 days before Janice's event, a letter arrived in my mailbox, handwritten in a familiar cursive. The return address was Emily's. It wasn't a letter of apology. It was a defense, paragraphs filled with excuses. George. Said it was okay. The kids wanted the trip. She didn't think I'd find out. It was only one Christmas. I didn't finish reading it. I folded the paper neatly and tucked it into the back of my journal, behind the page titled Running Total. Not as a keepsake, but as a footnote. The night of the anniversary dinner, I wore a slate blue dress and a soft pearl necklace. Janice greeted me with a warm embrace and a quiet apology whispered over clinking glasses. "Whatever your daughter didn't give you," she said, "I hope you know, you mattered to us." I smiled. I do now. I stayed long enough to share stories, sip wine, and dance once to an old Billie Holiday tune. It had been years since someone asked me to dance. When I got home that night, I looked in the mirror and saw something new in my own reflection. Not anger, not grief, but freedom. The snow came early that year. By Christmas Eve, the rooftops shimmered under a thick white quilt, and the air smelled like pine and cinnamon. I stood by the kitchen window, wearing a soft red dress that hugged my figure just enough to make me feel seen, vibrant. It had been decades since I wore red on Christmas, always choosing soft neutrals, as if I'd been trying not to take up too much space. But this year was different. The house, once quiet and aching, was filled with laughter and the soft clink of dishes. I'd opened my doors to 5 other women, neighbors, acquaintances, and new friends, each with their own silent stories. A widow whose children now lived abroad. A divorcee who hadn't heard from her son in months. A retired nurse who said, with a dry smile, that she preferred camaraderie over pity. They brought casseroles and bottles of wine. I made my signature rosemary roast chicken, the one Emily used to request when she was still small enough, to sit on my lap. We ate, we laughed, we toasted to beginnings, not endings. Later, when carolers passed by on the street, I opened the door wide and sang with them. My voice wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. It was strong, clear, joyful. When the night quieted again, and the last guest hugged me goodbye, I stood by the fire with a mug of mulled wine and looked at my phone. No messages, no missed calls, and for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't care. I placed the phone face down on the mantel, next to a small porcelain angel my mother had once given me, and whispered, "Merry Christmas, darling," to no one in particular and everyone who mattered. There were no ghosts in the house tonight, just warmth, flickering gently across the walls. I curled up on the couch with a blanket, a book, and my own company. And in that quiet, full of peace and firelight, I realized I had never felt more loved.